Yeah, the main one is rather too many people there. I think it's a bit random.
Well,
And the
that's one of the problems. Yeah, they get
and
too big.
the professional editors, I think, is a good one. Although some people seem to have disappeared from that.
It's not
I
a
think.
surprise. I've started a Facebook one that's like
Right.
so. There's my backyard bird feeder. People, I show that. I found is you get expensive bird food. Hey everyone, here we go. Let me turn that countdown off. Today we're going to talk all about Final Cut Pro workflow. There's lots and lots and lots of questions. Alex Snelling from the UK has done a lot of work putting out this white paper. The original one was for Final Cut Pro 10.1, you said, Alex?
It was 10.1. I think it was to coincide with the new Mac Pro, which I think was released which is obviously not new anymore. The cylinder in December 2013, I think, and I think it was coinciding with that, which was also the introduction of the library model in Final Cut Pro 10. So it was pretty much a rewrite of Final Cut Pro 10 when it came out. Because previous to that, I don't know if people remember, it's just projects and events.
Well, when they did projects and events, I was doing compound clips. I didn't do projects. Mm-hmm. I edited everything in a compound clip and just used that for my timeline back in those days. I remember.
Yeah. And it's still quite a good... that's still quite a good policy. It's still quite effective, I think, using compound clips. But yes, yeah, it seems like a long time ago. It's kind of more like 6 years, although it sounds like 7. But yeah, because it was right at the end of 2013. It was, yeah. Right.
Ago. So Final Cut Pro is approaching 10 years. June will be 10-year-old. So do you think, since 2013 to 2021, that's 7-8 years, right? Mm-hmm. Do you think that Final Cut Pro has advanced as far as the workflow, not features and stuff, but like the workflow, do you think it's advanced 7 years worth? Or do you think there's things that could be done a little bit more efficiently in 2021?
I always think there are things that could be done better, and I think everybody does, because everybody's got their own little pet sort of, preferred top 10 list of most wanted features.
Yes, yes.
So it's never going to be perfect, is it? I mean, I was wondering, maybe it's pretty good now. It's obviously better than it's ever been, but Final Cut 7 was pretty good when they took that away, so maybe it's time for them to just...
I liked Final Cut 7 a lot,
Yeah,
I know you were a trainer, certified trainer. I was as well.
Yeah, I mean, I was also an editor. I worked on the World Cup in 2010, supervising like 50 edit suites of Final Cut Pro 7.
Wow.
Running on a huge Xan. And yeah, that was a real moment for me, having come virtually all of the way with Final Cut Pro from its very early days, to suddenly find myself in Johannesburg, on the actual World Cup, not just someone else, producing something for the World Cup. It's the official FIFA host broadcaster using Final Cut Pro 10, which was amazing. And I guess that was the apex for me. It didn't really get any higher than that. There wasn't much higher you could get. But then I think during that time, Apple weren't there. Apple didn't really attend the World Cup, even though it's arguably, one of the highest profile, certainly sporting jobs it's ever been used for. Apple weren't there, and like a year later, it was kind of clear why they weren't, because they were right in the middle of developing Final Cut Pro 10. So, yeah, history tells a different story. But yeah, I loved it.
Yeah. So your reason for writing the original paper in 2013 was the trash can, and also switching over from 10.0 to 10.1 libraries. Now, 10.0 to 10.1 had 9 iterations. They went from 10.0.1 to 9. This time they did more than that. They went to 11, Final Cut Pro 4.11 or 4.10. They actually broke the record.
Yeah, you're right, actually. Although I think 10 was just a little bug fix, wasn't it? Or a tiny little feature addition. Yes. But yeah. Yeah,
10.4.9 was the
big one.
When was the last time they updated Final Cut Pro 10, Final Cut Pro 10 with major features in August? Never. They've never done that before. This was at the end of August. They came up with 10.4.9. And at the time I was saying, it seems like this should have been in 10.5 maybe, but 10.5 came out and it was like tiny.
Well, I think 10.5 current, it was really just to go with Big Sur, wasn't it? The icons are updated, and it lost the X or the 10.
Right.
So I think that's the way that I look at it, is that 10.5 was really just drawing the line under everything that had gone before it, and following, dropping the X from the OS and everything. So just in a way, wiping the slate clean, and, got a clean canvas now, fresh slate almost. And in terms of speed and response time and, efficiency, it's incredible. It's incredibly fast. I mean, I haven't got any of the new hardware yet, but, it's an exciting time to be thinking that it's going to just get faster and faster, and potentially, exponentially faster using the new chips. So
right. That's what I'm hoping. I have a 2019 Mac Pro, so I have a big Mac Pro, but I'm looking to update my MacBook Pro, my 16-inch, so I'm waiting to see what they come out with in 2021 or 2022, whenever they do that.
Yeah.
One thing I know I need more than 2 Thunderbolt ports, period.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
need
a lot of ports.
Yeah,
Never enough ports.
I have 8 Thunderbolt 3 ports on my Mac Pro. 8.
Wow.
They're not all filled up. Most of them. And I have 6 USB 3 ports, so I got a ton of ports. So I don't want to go backwards. That, but the MacBook Pro at least has to have 4. Come on.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I don't know when that's going to be, really. To be honest,
I don't either.
I have so I have no insight into what's going on at Apple. Who does really? But yeah, it's certainly not going to get slower. That's one thing that you can be sure of. But having said that, I think they just announced an 8K Sony DSLR today. So you're going to need those higher, faster chips, aren't you?
Yeah, you're right. The interesting is it's the A1. It's 8K. It's $6,500 for the body. Now, Blackmagic has the 12K, right? They did a 12K or an NAB last year when NAB was supposed to be. So I don't need that much. I mean, 4K's been fine for years. I wouldn't mind if it went up to if a GH6 comes out and comes up to 6K, that'd be fine. But 4K is fine, for me, absolutely. For the time being.
Totally agree with you. It looks amazing. I don't know when it's going to stop, really. I remember playing with some 8K quite a long time ago. I'm guessing it came from a Red camera, but it looks amazing. But it's not really the most important thing for me anymore. Increasing resolution, it's increasing quality, I think.
Right. Right.
So yeah, those what a year for cameras it was last year, and I managed not to buy one. So
me too, except for my iPhone. I bought the iPhone 12.
Yeah. But yeah, obviously it's going to be ready for all of that, and it's just the response time and you start up Final Cut and it takes seconds. I mean, literally a few seconds, certainly less than 10 seconds, even with very, very big libraries. And I look back to how it was when I first wrote the original version of this paper, which was, a little bit of a thumb twiddle, especially with larger libraries.
Right.
No, it's just incredible. It's Apple, isn't it? They've definitely optimized everything to be working well. So going back to your original question about, features, I think, it's time now to start adding maybe a few features on top of that incredible performance and
well, it seems
irresistible.
It seems like so. For 9 years, the Final Cut Pro team gave us a major feature update when they did a full point update. 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, and 10.4 all were major feature updates. 10.5 wasn't like that. They completely changed. So for 9 years, they did one thing. When 10.5 came out, and I understand like exactly what you're saying, Big Sur and the new Apple Silicon, I understand that. Here's what I expect to happen. I expect a 10.6 to come out in 2021. And I'll tell you why. Because Logic Pro went from 10.4 9 or 10.4.8 to 10.5 in the middle of May last year, right in the middle of the pandemic, right? They updated a major version. 6 months later, they went to 10.6. 6 months, they went from 10.5 to 10.6. They went to 10.5.1 with the bug fix and then directly to 10.6. I think Final Cut's going to do exactly the same thing.
Yeah, you could be right. But I try not to get involved in supposition. It's just, you never know. You never know.
No, absolutely.
So, yeah, but I mean, one thing that I do know is that it's incredibly robust now. So, it's a good time to write this paper, I think. I'd have liked to have done it, I think, a couple of years ago. But I think across the board, manual writers and tutorial, creators are getting increasingly frustrated because of the turnaround times of software. So I'm hoping that this is certainly going to be around for a while. That's why I was saying, with the icons have just changed. It's now gone into Big Sur. So I think in terms of the actual framework and the base of it all, it's probably going to stay fairly similar. And might require a little update if anything new comes out. But certainly I think in terms of workflow, unless it's totally turned on its head, then this paper should remain current for a while.
Okay, let's look at the paper.
Okay.
So I have the paper. Actually, I'm going to, since we're on opposite sides, I'm going to switch this over to the same sides we are when we're live.
Okay, that's good.
So there we go. That way we won't confuse people. So Final Cut Pro Shared in Remote Solutions 2021. This paper is phenomenal, Alex. I mean,
Have you read it all?
Yes.
Wow, thank you.
I haven't memorized it. I haven't memorized everything. But things like, okay, I have a RAID 5, connected via Thunderbolt. Is that good to use with Final Cut Pro libraries and cache files? Don't answer that. We're going to get into that. I didn't know. I know SSDs are,
Okay.
well, I know SSDs are really cool. I have 2 NVMe SSDs, 3. I have the internal one in my Mac Pro. And then I have another one on a PCIe card. And then I have another one connected in a Thunderbolt 3 enclosure with a Thunderbolt 3 cable, not a USB-C enclosure. I have a true Thunderbolt 3, a little aluminum enclosure. So I have 3 2 terabyte SSDs, and that's generally what I work on because it just seems faster. But it's more complex than just that. You have cache files, you have the library, you have your media, right? So let's start going over your paper. Let's go over that paper a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
So Final Cut Pro Shared in Remote Solutions 2021 and introduction. The reasons for writing and rewriting this paper, for who it's worth, what's changed since the original. So Tangier Clark chimes in. There's 66 pages, absolutely. Yeah, 66 pages. It's a lot of work. I mean, it took you more than a weekend, right?
Certainly did, yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of the perfect year for it last year, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Quite
that's true.
Time on my hands. Yeah.
That's true. Now, I've been working from home for years. I mean, so last year didn't really change my workflow much. I worked at the National Archives in Washington, D.C. for 8.5 years. I was a post supervisor down there. So I got tired of driving into Washington every day, riding in the metro and stuff. So I quit a few years ago. Because three hours a day travel, and I said, I just won't do this anymore. So I left.
Totally agree with you.
Yeah, so I've been working from home for like 3 years myself now, remotely and other things. So Chapter 1, Understanding and Managing Media and Libraries in Final Cut Pro. Chapter 2, Workflow Tools Available Within Final Cut Pro. Chapter 3, Third-Party Collaborative Workflows in Final Cut Pro. One of the main things about Final Cut Pro that I've really, really like, and it's hard to leave, is the third-party infrastructure that it has. The third-party plugins, because over Christmas holiday, I got Resolve Studio, 17 Studio. I don't have it yet. B&H hasn't mailed it to me, but I bought it because it had the speed editor and the studio for $295 for both. I said, that's a pretty good deal. I'll go ahead and jump in. And I've been using that, but when I do use it, I miss those third-party plugins. I just bought 2 this last week, one from Mark Spencer and one from somebody else, Premium VFX from FX Factory.
It's interesting you say that because I've recently been doing an Avid job, shock horror, which, I mean, I've been using Avid since last century, not regularly. I did originally learn how to use it and then moved away from it for reasons of, you're just saying, travel, long hours working in edit suites, and it was incredibly expensive. So there was no way you could own an Avid back then, but now you can. So it was quite a surprise after quite a few years actually to have a look at my own copy of Media Composer, which was redesigned and everything and brought into this century, as some people have been saying. But one of the things that I did really notice is that in terms of the plugin technology, I mean, there's a lot in there. The audio is obviously great because of Pro Tools, but just sort of simple transitions and the third-party ecosystem. It was like, I mean, maybe I've not dived in enough, but because I've been collecting Final Cut Pro plugins for since forever.
Right.
I've got an amazing suite of them, but then suddenly to just open up an Avid and like, wow, I can't, there's not even a simple zoom transition in here, which obviously is all the rage. It's almost something that you have to have. But it made me realize that Avid is still very much about just storytelling, just cutting. And that's what the majority of people are using it for. It's just really a few functions, which is mainly involves putting pictures and sound together to tell a story, which I have to say is really one of my favorite things. And if that ecosystem existed, like, with Avid jobs, there still tends to be what people will call a film editor and then an online editor.
Right.
And they're generally not the same person, but with us lot, with Final Cut Pro, it's everything, So it's a really big difference. So it's really quite strange to go back to an Avid and suddenly think, wow, I'm just actually focusing on the content here. I don't have to worry about anything else. And it's a very different world,
That's interesting. I never, when I've talked to other Avid editors, I've talked to Michael Yanovich, he's an Avid editor for 27 years, and he switched to Final Cut. I don't think anybody talked about that, being the storytelling kind of an NLE versus all the other things that you get distracted by.
Yeah. I mean, I do tend to find, it's editing is about, at the end of the day, that's why I became an editor, and that's why I still love editing. It's because of the storytelling, and there's nothing like a day's editing when you know that you've created something out of nothing in terms of story. I mean, this is just me personally.
Right.
And to be honest, it doesn't really matter what software you're using. So I've it's kind of made me take a bit of a step back from the whole ecosystem discussions and trying to do everything myself and trying to be a one-stop shop, which obviously you have to do sometimes. And so I don't think in TV, certainly not film, you will get asked to cut and finish a film.
Right.
It's more your sort of corporate jobs, YouTube films, which I still make a lot of. When you've actually got to get a film out the door and it's just you, that's obviously where Final Cut Pro comes into its own. But in terms of just the editing, it was really interesting to go back, almost 20 years to just like, wow, I'm not saying Avid is 20 years out of date. I'm saying it's the same paradigm. And it's not much has changed about the storytelling way of editing, It's
very interesting.
Different buttons.
So we got. Go ahead.
Carry on. No, carry on.
We got a comment. He would like to read the PDF. Is it possible to get by it? Yes, it is. It's on Frame.io, right?
Yeah, it's on Frame.io. I think it's because it's it's just a link. It's linked there, and it's a PDF. I think you just download it.
Yep, that's what I did. Tangier Clark says, I've noticed that too. I'm used to taking things from beginning to end. Most people I know are AEs and don't get to actually edit, but instead prepare content for the editor.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I mean, AEs. I mean, who's lucky enough to have one of them these days?
Everybody's an AE, right? Their own AE.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, you can make a lot of money doing that, but when you're competing for a job, and you're quoting for a job, like say maybe going up against a facility, and it's just yourself. You've got to realize that they do generally have assistants working for you. I mean, I've just it's a bit of a long story. I'll maybe tell you later in the chat if we've got time. But I've lost a job due to a facility kind of trying to wrangle it away from me because of financial reasons rather than anything else. Because there's so much politics. Still,
yes.
When I say politics, I mean money, really. But,
you mean in the United States, of course, it's the whole Hollywood thing with Avid and Final. Now, tell me this, since you brought that up. Do you think it's important for Final Cut to get into Hollywood, considering when you talk about numbers, very small amount of editors are in Hollywood compared to the last numbers that they announced were 2.5 million in 2018. The Final Cut Pro team did 2.5 seats. So now we're up to 3 to 4 million seats of Final Cut Pro. How important is it for Final Cut Pro how much resources should they spend to get into Hollywood, do you think?
How important to who?
In Final Cut itself, do you think they should spend their resources trying to get into Hollywood and doing all the things that Hollywood would require them to do?
You mean how important to the continuing success of Final Cut Pro?
Well, it's already successful. So
yeah,
that's not the question.
The continuing success.
Well, the priorities of, in other words, well, let me just say this. When I've seen the Final Cut Pro team talk in Cupertino multiple times, they have said over and over again, we have different areas that we're concentrating on as far as Final Cut Pro are concerned. Education, YouTube, documentary filmmakers, event filmmakers. Hollywood's certainly a part of that, but it's not the main focus. They've said that multiple times. Some people think Hollywood should be the main focus. I mean, some people that I've, over the years, have said that. They think that the Final Cut team isn't concentrating enough on what Hollywood needs. I don't think Final Cut was ever, Final Cut 10 was ever really designed specifically to go after Hollywood. Doesn't seem like it.
I mean, I think, there was a U-turn at some point, because I remember really getting involved just as Cold Mountain was being released, and people were talking about that, and that was a huge feather in the cap,
right,
of Apple. But it was a totally different world then, and then they were very, very keen on getting into Hollywood or getting into films, because it's aspirational, it's exciting, but everything's been turned on its head since then. That was pre-iPhone, so
okay, that's a long time ago.
Such a different company then, and it's, in terms of important for Apple, I think probably no.
I don't think so either. And it's not, obviously some of the things that'll benefit a documentary filmmaker will benefit Hollywood, and some of the things that Hollywood would get as a feature would trickle down to everybody else. But I don't think that they should only put blinders on and worry about Hollywood, which they're not doing. I think that would be a big mistake.
Yeah. Well, I think they've proven that with their what they've actually been doing.
Exactly.
Actions speak louder than words, I guess.
Exactly. That's what they've been doing. So let's go back to your paper. So we talked about chapters 1, 2, and 3, the basic parts. Let's go to, let me get here.
Yeah, we're only on page 2 at the moment. It's going to be quite a long session.
No, I know. We're not going to do every single one. We're just going to do some of the things. So here's one of the things I found interesting. Who is this paper for? You said you wrote the first version of this paper in 2013 with my good friends at 10.1. Are they still involved with this one?
No, they're not, because they've kind of changed tack a little bit. They're still amazingly good, but they're not really in this world. They're focusing on something else entirely. Basically cloud-based solutions, which I think is obviously where it's all going. But
yeah, so this paper is intended for seasoned and new users of Final Cut, both technical and non-technical. So I hope I've found the right balance of clarity and brevity. I think you have.
Yeah, I mean, that's very hard. It's I just hope I have, because I don't want to put some people off. I mean, it's kind of written from experience, thinking about several or more people that I've consulted with, trained, troubleshooted with over the last few years, and seen the mistakes they've made. And some of them have been really technical. Some of them have been completely non-technical, I think it would be really good. I think this paper's too technical, but for the producers who are setting up the workflow and the hardware and the software, in terms of purchasing and in terms of employing their editors, it would be great for them to be able to read this, but I think it's probably a little bit too detailed. But I've seen it's basically I've seen too many mistakes being made so early on. The last one was on a really quite a high profile feature. It's a feature documentary about a well-known person. It's not released yet, but it was awful what they'd done. I just walked in and I almost turned around, because it was one of those situations which was almost unremediable. I almost felt like saying, you need to start again here, because everything about this is wrong. And when you get in situations like that, you've got people trying to protect themselves. They're trying to justify their own decisions.
Oh, yeah.
And that no one wants to be told that they're wrong. And you've got three people staring at you, and one person's been running this workflow for nearly a year. And their boss is sitting there, and, they're trying to say with their eyes, are you telling me that he's made a mistake here? And, there's a lot of diplomacy involved in situations like that, and it's a bit of a shit show, to be honest. But I actually don't think those people will read this paper. I think the editors might, but it depends who you're taking. It depends who you're taking your advice from. I think I think every producer's got a technical person that they'll phone up and ask.
Absolutely.
Someone they'll trust. And hopefully this will get the message across, because there's so much bad information out there.
Well, let's look at some more. So you talk about libraries. You go through that, of course, and right off the bat, let's say you having your working library in an optimum location is going to be one of the key factors in determining the responsiveness of your system. So those are some of the things that editors want to find out about, because I keep hearing, keep your cache here, keep your cache there, keep your library here, keep your media there. So that's what we're going to go over in this specifically in this thing. And we're going to talk about some of the third-party solutions that you like. So library is a self-contained unit. All assets in an event or project must reside in the library. So let's talk a little bit about internal versus managed versus external.
Okay.
Do you have a preference for the work that you do, one over the other?
Yes. External. I mean, basically, let's put it this way. I've done. I have a camper van, and I've been renovating that, and filming a bit of that, and I've been doing a bit of filming of doing up our house as well, and making. I don't know what we're going to make out of it. We may not even make anything, but for stuff like that, it's great just to throw it into Final Cut as managed media. And it's all in one place, and you can just sort of move that over onto a hard drive. But for anything else, it's external media for me.
Right.
The main reason for that is because, and I think I go into significant detail in this paper on that, is that basically your media and your library are not necessarily going to be. It's not necessarily going to be possible to find a perfect drive for them both to be on, unless you have a 5 terabyte SSD, and I'm sure they're coming, but they're not quite here yet, and they're going to be bloody expensive, and also they're not going to be protected at all. So I've still got three RAIDs sitting here, which I hardly use, but I tend to archive media back off onto them. And I do tend to use SSDs, but I still use local libraries. Always.
I do too.
But local libraries with nothing in them apart from the databases, and all the media is somewhere else. Now, people can argue against that and say, it doesn't actually really matter, and especially with this new release where it's actually a lot easier to manage your media out of the library, using the updated consolidate
proxies.
Using the consolidate and move and copy functions and stuff. It's it's a lot easier to make sure that your media is not in your library, so that, for example, you can email someone a library.
Right.
It did used to be a little bit tricky, but that was in the past.
Right.
Now. But
yes. So the first thing that I do when I make a library, so I have a name for it, right? So I name the library, whatever it is. Before I do anything else, I make a master folder, same name, and put the library inside of it. And that's where I keep all my media organized in that master folder. Even if I make a managed Final Cut Pro library, I still put it in a master folder. That's just my habit. And then I have the one master folder to drag to archive or whatever I have. I don't have to worry about where everything is. Everything goes in that one folder. So I do that all the time. That's just a matter of habit. Let's go back to your paper some more. So I got a kick out of this. A project in Final Cut Pro is a sequence, nothing more and nothing less, right?
Yeah.
So sequence / timeline. There's been people that have been complaining that Final Cut Pro doesn't use normal nomenclature in the industry, so a project is different in Final Cut versus the general term project. Have you ever heard that?
Of course, yeah. Oh yeah, of course. I mean, I hear it every day in my own head as well, because I use Premiere a lot, and as I mentioned, I've been using Avid as well.
Right.
So yeah, it is what it is, really, isn't it?
Yes.
I find it.
Exactly.
I find it annoying, but I decided on this paper that a project in the normal sense, outside of the Final Cut Pro world, I'd have to call that a job, just to avoid the going round and round in circles. I've gone round, those workflow discussions where someone's saying, so where are we going to put all of our projects? And you don't know whether they're talking about Final Cut projects or their actual project folder that you were just talking about. So I tend to lose that word and just use job. To be honest, I wish it wasn't called a project.
I don't know why they did that. I have no idea.
Yeah.
Especially the project thing. The library is a little different, but the project, I just call, to me, everything's, my big container is a project, and I call timelines in Final Cut, I call them timelines rather than projects.
Intentions, disruptive being good, and shaking people up, changing their ways of thinking. But I think it's just caused a lot of confusion, really, over the years.
It seems to, it seems to. When Final Cut does something like that, like when they chose the Roman numeral X versus 10 in the pronunciation, they said, no, it's supposed to be pronounced 10. The heck with that. I pronounce it the way I want to. As a matter of fact, the Final Cut Pro team at the last Creative Summit, they themselves said, so we dropped the X or 10 or whatever you want to call it. They themselves said, drop the X. They didn't say drop the 10. So I just, whatever. I don't care if somebody calls it X. I don't care if they call it 10. I've had people call it both things on the radio show and stuff. By the way, Alex, this is probably my 190th live show of Final Cut Pro Radio TV Live. Started in 2017 at the Creative Summit with Facebook Live, And then I evolved. Now we're on YouTube Live. Now we're on Facebook. We're on Periscope all at the same time. This is probably about 190. So I'm approaching 200 live episodes of this. Now my radio show. Go ahead.
You only started in 2018, did you say?
2017 for the video live streams. Wow. The Final Cut Pro Radio podcast is started its 6th year. I have 2 podcasts, and between the 2 of them, I have 1.2 million downloads of the audio podcast. Just went over that. We started our 6th year on that, so. But back in those days, it was like 720 by 720 square video. It's all you got out of Facebook. Now I have, whatever. I can stream up to 4K if I wanted to. I think we're doing 1080p. I'm not sure. All right, let's go back to the white paper. Libraries are independent workflow fundamentals. All clips in any project must reside in the same library. So the library is the master container in Final Cut. Inside the library, you have events and you have projects. Projects, for most people that don't know, are timelines, right? In Final Cut, just as they're timelines. So that's what I call them. I call them a timeline. What are events?
You asking me?
Yeah, what are events? Because sometimes people from outside Final Cut get confused because you have a library, which is a master container, and you have a timeline, a project, which is a timeline. So events are what?
Well, they're just like sub-units within a library, rooms or bins or folders. I think they're not folders, but I think that's probably the easiest way to describe them. They're folders, but they're more clever than folders. But you can have as many as you want. You store things in there. You can't have an event within an event, but essentially they're just storage containers. And I guess importantly, they each have their own database. So they all speak to each other via the library, which also has a database.
So that's interesting. That's something I wasn't paying attention to. I knew that the basic Final Cut Pro library is a database, but the event is that's a separate database from the library?
I mean, if you right click and dig into a library, which I don't recommend to anybody to do this at home because you might touch a file and everything might go offline. But if you go in there, you'll find various little packages, and you'll find inside each master library a database. I think it's just .fcp lib off the back of my off the top of my head, and events are similar. I can't remember off the top of my head. I can't remember exactly what the file extension is, but yeah, each event is unique, and I'm guessing that's one of the solutions to how and why it's so easy to move events in and out of Final Cut Pro and remain independent. I mean, for avid editors, I'm not sure if any would be watching here, but that's basically how bins work. They have their own databases. Not exactly how bins work, but it's all database managed. Right. So one of the things that I bought a Resolve 17 Studio over Christmas holidays, and there's a couple of things I really, really like about it. 2 timelines. I would love to have the ability to have 2 timelines in Final Cut, to drag from one to the other, rather than left, right arrows back and forth. You have one over top the other. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I use what people call Pancake Editing in Premiere a lot, which is a really nice technique actually. I think that's a fairly similar, if not identical, workflow, but essentially you open up one sequence as a source and you can actually see the individual elements within the sequence. You can copy and paste them, you can drag them across, or you can actually insert and overwrite directly from one sequence into another. Right. I agree. I absolutely agree. And I'm currently engaged in a very long and increasingly large documentary project that's been going on for 6 years now that I've been shooting. And there's about maybe 70 different interviewees so far.
Wow.
So I've cut each of those down into individual sequences or projects. I am actually still using Final Cut Pro with it. So I've got a lot of projects. So I've got one event with all of those projects in them. And when I actually come to start cutting the actual piece, I'm going to obviously want to take different elements from each of those projects. And I'm kind of stuck really as to what the best way to do that in Final Cut Pro is. The only way really to get a sequence into a sequence or a project into a project is using compound clips.
Right.
So you can actually load a compound clip and edit it into a project, but then you can't see really what you're doing. So I would sorely like to see that. I think it's a huge oversight.
In Final go ahead.
In Final Cut Pro, yeah.
Final Cut Pro 7, you could do that. You could drag a project to a project. Not only could you drag a project to a project, you could also, I forget what the key combination was, Option or Command drag it, and it would go to the individual components. Yeah. It would change the individual components into the timeline. But I agree, having two timelines is, I really, really like that in Resolve.
I think it was the Command key from memory.
Yeah, it seems like it was Command or Option, yeah. You can open up Final Cut 7 and take a look?
No. I'm on Big Sur. Final Cut stopped working 7, God knows when, but certainly not going to open. In fact, I've deleted it. I had it sitting on my computer for some years without it ever opening. But now it's gone now, sadly.
Yeah, I still have it. I have an old MacBook Pro it's on, and I have an old Mac Pro downstairs that it's still on, so I still have it. Yeah. I was recapturing some VHS tapes recently, and I used AJA hardware, and I used the Final Cut Pro and stuff, so it came in handy. So one of the main questions we're going to go over now, library and file placement. Where do I save my Final Cut Pro library? And the simple answer. Is there a simple answer? And where do I save my media? The simple answer. So let's talk about the library first. You go ahead and tell me what the simple answer is.
Your fastest drive, I think, is ultimately what I'm saying there. So your fastest drive, which doesn't necessarily just mean the fastest in terms of drive speed. It means connectivity, everything. The one that will deliver the information, the data from your library to the CPU as fast as it possibly can.
Okay.
It's almost impossible to think that anything is going to be faster than one of the modern flash drives that are internally installed. And again, with those, the sizes of those increasing now. I don't know what the largest you can get on a new Mac Pro is now. I think it's 4 terabytes or something.
4 maybe. I have 2. So
I don't have one of those, but that must fly.
It does. It's like 3,000 megabits per second, whatever, 2,800. Yeah. So what about a RAID? What about a RAID for storing the library?
For me, the simple answer for that is absolutely no. I mean, it's the way the RAID is configured. I mean, there are external storage devices like the Jellyfish and others which have caches which are attached to their striped arrays. But that's not the same as putting it on a RAID. And this has been the source of much debate. And not only that, it's also a bit of a stick in the mud in terms of shared workflow, because obviously if you're going to be sharing libraries on a server, whether it's local, within your facility or on a cloud somewhere, you've absolutely got to make sure that drive and connectivity is as fast as possible.
So the RAID is a problem because of the way it reads and writes to the database, the Final Cut Pro library database. Is that the problem? I mean,
Well, just really the speed of access, really, and the amount of data flow to and from it. So there's two or three things, the way that, the read and write is configured, but also, I mean, on an XAN, for example, which there are still many of them still running quite successfully. The BBC have loads still. They can't, they're struggling to work out how they're going to get all of their footage off an XAN because it's so big. They've
right,
got to buy something that's as big, if not, several times larger, and find a way of actually migrating it all.
right.
It's not as easy as that. But so they still have them running. But the last job I did there, I spent quite a long time trying to convince people not to have their libraries on the XAN. Because obviously it's very easy because you can go into different edit suites and it's always there.
Right.
But the response and the speed, certainly on an older XAN, I mean, this is an older XAN, the XAN's not really being installed as far as I know anywhere. It's been discontinued really. And there are much, much better RAID arrays and, NASes and, complex storage devices. But I think it's in that word complexity is a whole nest of vipers really. There's a whole lot of mistakes that you can start making if you start just throwing libraries around anywhere.
Right. So that's one of the things that people are surprised about. I'm surprised about. I have two RAID 5s, and they're about 1/3 as fast as my NVMe SSD. So therefore, whenever I work, if the file, the project I'm working on is not too big, I'll keep it on the SSDs because I have 3 2-terabyte ones is what I have right now. The RAID is for keeping things I might come back to in much larger project files. Some of my projects are 1.2 terabytes. So obviously I'm not going to store them on a SSD. So let's go to the next part. Where do I save my media? It says simple answer. Give us the simple answer for that.
I'll have to make sure I'm reading what I've written. I might contradict my own self. Again, this is where I guess the complexity comes in. The answer is the fastest drive, but the fastest drive for your media is not necessarily the same drive as for the library. Yeah? Do you see what I mean?
Explain that, because I'm not clear about that.
Going back to a RAID, and I think somewhere in this paper, there's a little diagram with the cars and the bicycles on the motorway.
Oh yeah, I love that. Let me see if I can find that for you.
That basically, that's what you're dealing with. With a library, you're talking about very, very fast sequential read and writes, or random read and writes. Whereas with media, it's almost like a stream. It's just playing back files. So XAN and all these striped RAIDs were optimized for playing back large media files. That's what they were invented for. Now there's all sorts of different configurations of RAIDs. Essentially they're everywhere. But the ones that are configured for media files, object storage basically, are not going to be optimized for library storage, because the library storage is the library inside of that database is tiny bits of data that's been constantly written to and from. I've got a background in science, so I do like to test stuff to make sure, especially when I've written this paper, obviously there's a Final Cut Pro manual, but everything that I've written here, I have tested to death. Basically changing one thing at a time, checking it again, trying this drive, trying that drive. One of the easiest possible ways of checking it for yourself is take a library, make it quite, maybe a library with media in it as well. The biggest library you can get, the most complex library, lots of events, keyword collections, projects, compound clips. The library that seems to take the longest to open up,
Right.
and time it and do like a scientific test with a stopwatch, you know, shut your computer down so you can make sure there's no cache, confusing the sort of experiment, as it were, and try opening the library. Try opening it from, you know, your local drive in the movies folder, which is originally
Right.
where
Right.
they're always created. Yeah. Which
Exactly.
actually I still use. I still have
Sure.
a lot of my Final Cut library still in the movies folder, and then put it on that supposedly incredibly fast RAID, and try opening it from there. And, you know, like close Final Cut down, you know, probably restart the computer and literally time it from, you know, double click and see how quick it is to open up. But not only that, also when you open a library, test how long it takes to load up a timeline or a project with all the waveforms and all the thumbnails.
Right. Right.
So in other words, reading or writing from the cache. So all of that data, all those thumbnails and waveforms, they're all saved in the cache file. So that's also important. But all of this data has to be written and read onto the fastest drives. So the project file, the project file, see, I've said it now. The library is different from the cache, as you know, as you've mentioned several times. But
right.
That's probably the thing that you need the fastest storage of all. Some people might say the cache would need to be faster because it's got actual more data that's being accessed more of the time. But this is getting really deep into it. But essentially,
yeah, go ahead.
You want a nice, simple, single drive, you know, a fast SSD with Thunderbolt 3 or 4, you know, is perfect.
Now people get confused and they talk about USB-C. That's not fast enough, is it? There's a USB-C connection. If they have a SSD USB-C drive, it's not nearly as good as a true Thunderbolt 3.
It's not as fast. It's probably fast enough for, you know, it's certainly fast enough to work. It's just not going to be as fast, you know. So, I mean, remember when Final Cut 10 first came out, most people were still using spinning internal drives. And they were running it from that. And I think that probably, you know, really, really worked against a lot of people's perception of how it was performing, because they had their libraries on, you know, god-awful, maybe even on some cases, you know, like USB 2 drives. And they're like, why is this not working?
What about Thunderbolt? I mean, what about Firewire? Just joking, of course.
Yeah. I still have a couple somewhere, yeah.
Remember we went from Firewire 400 to 800, and man, what a big speed increase that was. So Tangier Clark says, I put my library on a computer, small drive, or NAS, and media is separate on a separate drive, RAID 10 preferred. So can we split things up? Okay, can we put the library on an SSD, maybe the cache on an SSD, and the media, which might be a terabyte or more, on a RAID? Does that work? Is that efficient?
Absolutely, yeah.
Because the RAID seems to be optimized for media, right?
Yeah,
that's better.
That's the way to go. Yeah. I mean, there's many different types. There's like QNAPs, and they've got their own little caches. I think they have internal SSDs as well. So, you know, which are designed specifically for exactly what you're saying. But you'd make sure that your library would go onto that portion, and your media would go onto the you know, the larger spinning drives, essentially.
Right.
But so all of these RAIDs and all of these different systems are all configured slightly differently. So you know, there isn't one rule for everything, and they're all going to be set up slightly differently as well. So it's impossible to give one absolute you know, golden rule. That's why in parts of this report it may seem a little bit like woolly, but what I'm trying to do is get people to actually think themselves about their own situation and what they're actually trying to do. Because if you're just making cat videos, you can probably put your library anywhere. You know?
Right.
So yeah.
So Nick Coleman says, what's Alex drinking? A nice Chardonnay?
No, it's actually just water at the moment. Yeah.
There
I'm
you
actually
go.
on a non-drinking week. So which should be the first in quite a while, actually. But thanks for asking.
Yeah, good way to start the beginning of the year. So
Yeah.
I'm really glad that you said that, because I have some of my projects are terabyte, 1.5 terabytes, and there a lot of times that's on the RAID. I don't put them on my SSDs because my SSDs are only 2 terabytes themselves. So, but this is the only way you can do that is with external media. You can't do that if the media is internal to the library. You can't separate the two, right?
Yeah. Sorry, say that again. I was just looking at some of the hellos from the messages. There's people.
So the only way you can have the library and cache on a fast SSD and the media, which could be a terabyte or 2 terabytes, on a RAID, obviously, is if the media is external. You can't do it if your library is ballooning into 1 terabyte, 2 terabytes. That's problematic. So
very much so. Yeah. I'd also say, I've been saying this for a long time. I've done a lot of work at a training center, who a few years ago invested in a load of iMacs with fusion drives,
right,
because of the size. I think back then, hey, we got 2 terabyte fusion drives in all of our iMacs, and I'd actually just bought a new iMac myself, and I'd opted for a internal 5 gig SSD, and the performance of mine was just so much better.
I agree.
So fusion drives are rubbish, I think.
I agree. I had one in one iMac and never bought another one. Everything is SSD. No.
I don't
except
think
for the RAIDs.
I don't think they ship them anymore, do they? I don't think.
I hope not. I hope they didn't do that.
So yeah, it's all on page. I don't think the only thing about this paper is I don't think it. Oh yes, it does. It doesn't say. It's page 13. It's talking about all the different, the 4 separate storage locations. So that's where you choose where all your media is going to go, and importantly the cache, because I guess the cache is just kind of one of those little things that no one thinks about. And then they suddenly become made aware of it. Like, what's the cache?
Right.
And the cache is sitting there in the library, which is on a RAID drive, and you literally go in for a day's consultation, and I've sorted their problems out in the first 10 minutes. Aside from moving their media, it's just like, I'm just going to consolidate all of your media out of this managed library.
Right.
Move the empty library onto your local SSD, give it a try now. And they're like, wow. Okay.
Big difference.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not dissimilar in terms of the cache to Premiere, actually. Premiere has cache files. And one of the things that is constantly being, told to people who are troubleshooting and in trouble is, make sure your cache, where's your cache, what you're doing with your cache. And people are like, I think Premiere by default puts the cache somewhere utterly ridiculous.
Is that right? Well, I was going to ask you, does Final Cut, I don't recall seeing anything about storing cache versus storing the library versus storing the media in Final Cut documentation itself, or is there something that I missed?
Well, yeah, I'm sure it's there. Yeah, in the Final Cut manual, you mean? Yeah.
Well, yeah, in the documentation, for example, they would say, like we just talked about, I store the library and the cache on my SSDs. I have an NVMe SSDs, but I can store my media on an attached RAID. I don't think they've ever made that distinction. They may say put it on your fastest drive, but I don't.
Well,
remember...
I think Apple being Apple, they're not going to recommend specific workflows like that, because there's just, like you said, they've probably got 3 million plus users.
Right.
There's just too many scenarios. So Apple being Apple, they will try to make things as neutral as possible. I mean, that's what's probably one of the most difficult things about writing a paper like this is trying to get people information, but make them realize that the final decision is going to be yours. Here are the details and the information about how you're going to be making that decision, but that decision is going to be you, and you're going to have to live with it.
Right. Most of the time, sometimes Final Cut, in my opinion, does a little too much hand holding and doesn't let you do things that you'd like to do. For example, why can't I set the default to fit or fill in preferences?
Right.
Why can't I set that myself? Why does it always go to 1 and not let me set it? So sometimes there's a little too much of that.
Yeah. I agree. I think, again, it's a happy medium between, I think the Final Cut Pro 7 preferences were so top heavy, and there was so much in there that I think probably, I don't know this, but I'm guessing that somewhere there was a conscious decision to try and make things as simple as possible, maybe to avoid the preferences file not dragging the whole software down. But yeah, it would be quite nice to do that. I mean, yeah, what can I say?
Well, you said you had a lot of effects and things, right, in Final Cut?
Yeah.
Wouldn't you like to be able to drag and drop and organize them inside of Final Cut? Make a favorites folder and just drag them into the favorites folder, rename the folder, whatever you wanted to do inside of Final Cut. Wouldn't that be nice? Organize them that way? I know you can do it in the Finder.
Yeah, well, I could do it in, I see what you mean, but you could do it in using a project. I think that's what I've tended to do. Make a project template, or make a library template and have a project in it with all the various different plugins and settings, say for a particular job that you're always using, a particular vignette with those particular settings. Put it on a null clip in a timeline in a project, and just call that, effects template. You've got titles in there with different settings, and then you can just copy and paste those.
Right.
So I think that's...
Yes, I do exactly that. But what I do instead of that, if I have a title that I like the way I made it or something, I just make it into a compound clip. And then it goes goes to the browser. Then I save that in a master, what you're talking about, a master project I call reusable items. And I have them all in there. But it'd be nice if you could do it you have an effects browser. It's just like the browser up there for media. You can do folders, you can make smart collections, you can reorganize things, you can rename things. I'd like to see the same functionality in the effects browser. Just have it right there for yourself. So that way, every time you open it up, it's right there. So you talked about library properties. Let's go back to your paper. Somebody asked where the paper is. It's on Frame.io. Is that the best place to get it?
At the moment, that's the only place. I'll probably put it on my website eventually. But it's if you go to, there's an article that they've shared quite a lot, I think, on LinkedIn and Facebook and Twitter, written by Patrick Southern. But he there's a direct link to the paper in any of those articles. Or if you go to Frame.io blog, I think it's a little bit hidden, the Frame.io blog. If you go to their actual website, you can't actually see the blog for some reason. There's not like a link to their blog. I think they're keeping their blog entirely separate from their actual website.
Okay. That's interesting.
I think it's a WordPress blog. So yeah, it's in a different place, but I'm pretty sure it's certainly on mine. I don't know if you've shared it, but if you share that article,
I shared it as soon as I saw it. As soon as I saw it. Remember, because you, I think some other people. Let me go.
There's a link on there from.
I got it,
Patrick.
It's blog. Well, I'm gonna copy the link and I'm gonna put up a title with it in it so people can see it, and I'll leave it up. Let me see. Let me get my title here. Sometimes title. Why is it? I don't want a background. And I'm going to reduce it down. There it is. Add. So this is the actual link. Everybody, I'll leave it up. I'll leave it at the bottom here because people are asking about it. So I'll just leave it up there for everybody to see. Let me see if I can make that. I'll make it a little bit smaller so it'll all be one line. There we go. So it's blog.frameio.wordpress, whatever. I'll leave it up. People can look at the video. This is where Alex's white paper is. That's where it is. I'll leave that up on the screen. Do you see it, Alex?
Yeah, I can see that. It's not actually a link, is it?
No, I can't make it a link.
Yeah,
I
no.
don't know if maybe I can do it in YouTube. Let me see if I can do it in YouTube. I'll make it. Sometimes I think they might let me put it up. Let me see if they will. Yes. Okay, I put it up on YouTube and it's a clickable link.
Cool.
They let me do that. They don't let other people do that, but I'll leave it up here as well. So one of the things that people get confused about, and I've been confused about it myself, when we talk about importing media, right?
Yeah.
And we're talking about copy to the library or leave files in place, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those are two, but there's actually three, aren't there? Because if you copy to the library, you can be managed or external, and leave files in place is a third option, right?
No, copy to library is always going to be
What the preference is. If you have your preference set, you have in Final Cut preferences, you can choose in the Final Cut library, you can choose it to be managed inside the library, or you can choose it to be external, right? So if you copy to the library, it'll go to one of those two.
Yeah.
And then the third one is actually leave files in place. That's actually a third option. Because
I'm with you. Yeah. I
never thought about
there's
it.
Actually, there's just two options. One is copy and one is leave files in place. But if you change your storage location, then copy to library becomes copy to wherever you want. So,
right.
Yeah.
So,
but there's only two. There's only two options.
Two selections.
Yeah.
But it's actually three different places. It can be three. It can be three.
Well, it can be an infinite number, really.
Well, that's true.
So I think the new version has. I think it gives you an option on the pull down menu. I've not got it open now, but I think it gives you an option to choose other. So you can actually send it wherever you want at that time, which I think is new. I think you used to have to go back and actually change your storage locations before you imported. But I think now, from memory, I'm pretty sure you can now, if you go, oh, damn, that should be somewhere else, you can actually do that in situ in that menu, which is great, actually. But yeah. If you're working with external media, it's always leave files in place. I mean, really, the majority of my work over the last 6 or 7 years has involved leaving files in place, which does ask the big question: how do you get your files onto your drive? But that's another issue.
Right. So Brett Williams commented, you can organize effects, just nothing else. You have to save effects presets. I understand that. They even had a favorites folder in the effects browser on the last Final Cut Pro demo. I have my own favorites folder. And we're talking about back to the effects browser that I commented on. I know I can go into Motion and open up an effect and save it in special folder and all. I also know I can do it in the library. I want to do it directly inside of Final Cut Pro. In the browser, in the effects browser, you can do things in the other browser. I understand that there's workarounds. Can you throw the link in the comments? I put the link in the comments on YouTube. On YouTube, it's there. It's linkable. There we go. So where do let me see. Let's go on to some more things on your paper, because that's what we're here to talk about specifically. Media file location is
that's
controlled by... Go ahead.
Sorry, carry on.
I say media file location is controlled in the library properties pane in the inspector, accessed by selecting a library on the left-hand side of the screen and then going all the way over to the right-hand side of the screen to the inspector. I wish we had a HUD or a drop-down menu sometimes for some of these things so we could just right-click and place and choose things rather than left and right. I'll show you why. This is my screen, Alex. 34-inch LG monitor, 21:9 aspect ratio. So when I'm going in the browser, I go to one side, all the way up to the browser, and then I go all the way to the other side to the inspector to change something. So it's a lot of mousing back and forth. I wish I could right-click and choose some of the things, some of the obvious things. Like when I'm in the browser, I can right-click on the library and choose some things. Modify, for example.
Yeah.
Rather than going all the way back and forth. But we'll have to see what happens with the new version of Final Cut when it comes out.
Yeah. I mean, these conversations about top 10 most requested features. I mean, I think everyone's got their own requirements, haven't they? I think interface wise as well is so personal. I think one nice thing about the sort of integrated single window is that it's always the same, which does simplify things. It doesn't bother me actually. I just I know what you're saying, but it's generally I wouldn't be changing my storage locations more than a few times an hour in the most extreme situations, but so I just kind of live with that, I think.
Motion has the HUD, right?
Yeah.
There's some limited set of controls. You can just, wherever your mouse is, you can have it. That's what I mean. Just even in the timeline, when I select a clip in the timeline, there's things I'd like to do there rather than click the clip in the timeline, then go all the way up to the inspector, back to the timeline, rather than just right-clicking in the timeline and have the options right there.
Yeah.
That's all.
No, yeah, that would be good. Would be nice.
So library properties are modified in the, let me pull this up again. Well, that's interesting. Slides, why is that? There we go. So you modify in the inspector. Once you select the library on the left-hand side, then go to the right-hand side of the inspector. That's where you modify where your files are going to be stored. You're going to modify your media, your motion content, which we haven't talked about yet, your cache, and your backups. Now, motion content storage is only really important when you're going to share something, right? It's nothing to do with speed, like the cache.
No, although they're quite complex files, so it'd be a good idea for them to be on a fairly fast drive. I tend to keep them locally, but yeah, they are motion files, which can be very complex. So certainly wouldn't want them on a RAID.
Right. And then once again, the cache, that's where you would change the cache. People say, well, where do I change my cache? Right there. You do it in the inside of Final Cut, in the inspector. Once you select the library in the browser, then go over to the inspector, and we have all these options. Choose Modify. That's where you change your cache. That's where you change your media.
I think there's a nice thing that Apple introduced. I can't remember when, but when you actually create a new library, it automatically opens this very window. So it's it doesn't start flashing, but it's kind of a hint that you need to sort out these storage locations right now. And you need to change the library to not being called Untitled.
Yes. Yes,
But
absolutely.
I noticed, I can't remember when it was. It wasn't, I don't think it was that long ago, but you create a new library and whatever, however the window setup you've got, this this window comes open. Which
So
is just
this
like
one,
saying, just
yeah,
make sure that you do this.
absolutely. That's a great idea. I like that. I mean, I can't remember if I've ever seen that. But one of the things that always gets me if I don't consolidate my library is the storage used for media and motion content at the bottom of that one window there. That's where you check to make sure everything is consolidated into one location if that's what you want. It's right there in the inspector. I don't know how many times I've taken a library and copied it somewhere, open it up, and there's missing media because I didn't consolidate it. Did not consolidate.
I mean, it would be quite nice to have a pull down menu there to show you which actual folders and actual storage locations, how they sort of broken down, as opposed to just what particular drive they're on. But yeah.
This is
good.
crucial. Storage locations, it's vital to set storage location at the beginning of your job, but it can be changed in mid-job and is an essential control when performing media management tasks. The other thing is backups. Backups, where your backups are. I don't know if you're familiar with that app, Backups for Final Cut Pro. I use that all the time.
Right.
It's much more robust. It's like $19, $18.99, something in the App Store. There's been no charge for updates for years and years and years, but it's so much more robust than Final Cut Pro's backup feature. You can name all the backups. You can organize them in different folders on different drives, and you're still the same thing. You're saving the library, you're saving the event, you're saving the project. You can save the media, but that's not really what it's for. It's just for all the databases.
Mm-hmm.
So most people, I don't know how many times I've seen somebody on one of the boards say, hey, I lost my project. Open Final Cut Pro, it crashed, and my project's gone. Well, first off, check your backups, but it's probably not gone. Final Cut just chose not to open that one specifically. Have you ever seen that from people?
Yes. Yeah.
All the time.
Yeah. I mean, one of my little bugbears in terms of on that note is when I'm actually manually backing stuff up. Let's say I've finished a job. Let's call it 2020. It's 2020's over, so I've backed 2020 up and I've put it in a box under a drawer, never to be seen again. But then suddenly I've got to go back to it. But I've actually got, this is generally how I tend to work. I'll keep a copy local for maybe a month or so of a job that I've just finished in case there's any changes. But I've backed it up maybe in more than one location, maybe on a RAID, but also on a secondary storage. And then I will come to, where's my current working copy of this? And it will be, 3-4 months down the line. And whatever you do, if you open up a Final Cut Pro library, you can find all those libraries and you can look at the latest modified one. But if you've already opened up that library, the latest modified one, you won't actually be able to see when it was previously modified, if you see what I mean. If I've just opened it up today, then it will overwrite the previous sort of date. So then I won't know which was the most current. So I find that a bit of a bugbear. I'm not quite sure what the best solution to that would be. It's probably my own archiving strategies, but
well, get backups for Final Cut Pro. You can do that. You can do exactly what you're talking about. You can date them, name them what you want, store them on different drives, different locations, one at a time. You can, so I use that all the time. And then also, this is one of the things I hear people say: how do you save in Final Cut Pro? With backups for Final Cut Pro, you can save at any time. You just click the button to make a new copy, and you can date it, timestamp it, whatever you want. So you actually can save that moment in time with backups for Final Cut Pro. I sound like I'm an ad for the guy, but I have no financial connection whatsoever. I just really like the app. It's like $19 on the App Store. Very, very versatile. And it's, use it. If it saves you one time, what's $20? That's a couple of coffees.
Yeah. Someone's asking, do we use Library Media Manager? Or I think you mean Final Cut Library Manager, I think. Craig?
Or just...
I actually don't. If that's what you mean by the question, the actual third party, is it Arctic Whiteness?
Yes.
I actually stopped using it because I found it a little bit unstable. I'm not sure why. I think a lot of people have said that they'll swear by it, but I just found a little bit of oddness. So yeah, in answer to that.
Yeah. So I recommend backups for Final Cut Pro. I've been recommending it for years, especially when somebody has a problem. Very, very customizable, very, very customizable. And it's just better for organizing. Of course, the one in Final Cut's still there if you need it, the backup folder. So importing, let's go back to your white paper. Importing, copy, or leave files in place. So if you're copying from a media card, you have no choice, right?
Yeah.
You have to copy. You cannot leave files in place if you're copying from a camera card.
Well, if you're using Final, and this is a huge question, I think this is a huge question that I don't think we've got time to go into here because it's massive in my opinion. But a lot of people don't tend to use their NLE as their ingest option. And they will tend, whether it's an assistant or whoever's doing it, most of this paper has been written from the perspective of it already, the media already existing. But obviously, most sort of single users, YouTubers, DSLR, vloggers, whatever, they'll just stick the camera card in and import it straight away. But that doesn't then have to be managed media. So that's the key thing. Is like, don't stick it in your library, put it somewhere else. But I tend to find that Hedge is a good option. I know someone from Hedge is here. Hello, guys.
Yeah, I use Hedge a lot. I use Hedge all the time.
So there's others, but obviously your media strategy is only going to be as good as however you're creating your media. So we get into the realms of almost infinity now in terms of how many different options there are, Sony Catalyst Browse, all of the different options. So I think that's one of the reasons why Apple don't try to recommend too much, because there's just too many options out there. There's too many cameras and they're obviously changing all the time. There's different formats coming out. So best to remain neutral. So I think in a lot of ways, in an ideal world, if I was on a big job, I would have someone else ingesting all of the footage and possibly not using Final Cut Pro to do it. Although I think Final Cut Pro is better than... Say it again?
Would you use Hedge or something like that? Or
Yeah. Edit Ready is also good.
Right.
Hedge, I think Shot Put Pro is another one. There's, and then there's all the sort of different MAMs and DAMs and, many, many different options. I think specific to whatever particular production you're doing. Some people may need a clone immediately. They may need two drives cloned. And
if you're shooting a film and you have one copy of a camera card, you have nothing. You don't have anything. You got to make two copies before anything, or three copies.
You need 5 clones,
Exactly. So, one of the things people don't realize, people talked about making the image inside of Final Cut, the disk image. That's not checksummed. Final Cut Pro never checksum those. They never did. They want speed. They don't. They're not checksumming like. Actually, Hedge does it. Pathfinder, which is a Finder replacement now, they can do it. They do checksumming, different levels. And Kino has checksumming now to import media. So Final Cut doesn't have that. So if you're on something mission critical, that's kind of important when you make your clones. Definitely. So do you copy to a drive first from a card before you don't import right from the card? Alex, do you copy the media from the card to a hard drive and then import it in Final Cut?
It depends. It depends what I'm doing. If it's just me, it depends on the size of the job. Like I may actually just take the footage straight into my library. For example, my huge documentary that I've got 6 years of footage from, I've got a very clearly demarcated drive where I make sure that all the footage goes. I mean, that's running at over 4 terabytes now, just the media from that. So that's absolutely essential to get right. So, and again, it depends on the actual type of media as well. You know, there's some 4K RAW, there's some iPhone footage there. So, you know, getting stuff off an iPhone is not always as simple as it could be.
It's amazing. You would think that Apple would have that worked out by now, but I always have problems.
Well, Final Cut's okay for it, but, you know, try doing it without Final Cut and it starts getting fun. But, yeah. So and then there's the whole question of people copying camera cards or actually importing and then copying camera cards. But again, I think that's a whole other subject. It was something that I debated putting into this paper and discussing, but I think it's too big a subject.
I agree. So one of the things, file naming. The Final Cut Pro import dialog is simple, fast, and safe. However, one thing it lacks is the ability to change the names of files on import at any point afterwards. When I'm working on a big project, I always rename files in the Finder before I create a Final Cut Pro library. I organize in the Finder and then just drag the folders into Final Cut. It keeps the hierarchy of my folders in Final Cut. But I also will rename files. Now, I understand sometimes you can't rename them. I understand that. But I usually do that. And even if sometimes I forget what footage it was. Somebody asked me how I imported the footage without going to Final Cut. I said, I do import it in Final Cut. I have a dummy Final Cut Pro library just for importing. And then once I import the files, I'll take them out of that Final Cut Pro library and put them in my Finder and organize them in the folders the way I want, and then import it into my master library. So I have a dummy import library just for that reason.
Yeah. Oh, I've just found the page you're on now. Oh, right, we're on
19.
Page 18.
I'm on 19 on mine.
Okay. Oh, is it?
Yeah. I wonder why maybe I'm zoomed in a little bit. I think it changes.
Yeah, maybe it's... are you looking at it directly from the
PDF.
From the link? Oh, okay.
No, PDF. Sorry, PDF. I have a PDF here.
Okay.
That way I can do all these. I can do things like this.
Oh, of course, yeah. I don't know how that's changed.
Look at this.
Yeah. Nice.
So I can do that.
Get off my document. Copyrighted.
Absolutely. So just curious, how long did this take you? I know it took months to write this, and then you probably had several revisions, right?
I started it actually in August, and then sadly had a bereavement in the family, so it kind of got knocked back quite a lot. And then 10.5 came out, so it was done. It was done to coincide with the release of 10.4.9. Was it the new proxies anyway? But then that was delayed, so I wanted it to put it out to coincide with the the new release, the scalable proxies, the external proxies, all of that. But that didn't happen. As I was saying, I think just before we went live, it's kind of good because it's now updated with all the new icons using Big Sur. I hope. I've scanned through it. I think I've pretty much got them all. But so I think it's a bit future proofed. So yeah, there was one major session in sort of August, September, and then another another final pass, I think sort of November, December. But yeah, quite a good few weeks.
Yeah, so now we're back to cache files. Created automatically in the background, these files help streamline Final Cut Pro performance. Waveforms and thumbnails are tiny files used to draw media representations of the Final Cut Pro GUI. These do not affect playback directly, but can affect performance in general. I didn't realize they didn't affect it directly. I thought it was somehow direct.
No, it's basically the waveforms and the thumbnails. So every time you rescale a project or the event browser, and you're zooming in, zooming out, it's having to redraw all of those thumbnails and waveforms if you've got the waveforms visible. So obviously, if those have already, the first thing Final Cut does is that it scans the media files and it creates the actual waveforms and the thumbnails. And then when you rescale within the GUI, it doesn't have to actually recreate them. It just has to read them from the cache file. So, I mean, back in the day, in the early days of Final Cut Pro 10.1 and stuff, the waveform creation in the timeline, I mean, everyone that's been using it for a few years must remember there was a time when the waveforms just didn't appear and they took forever. And again, that was depending on the speed of your computer and the speed of the drive where the media was. If it was a long project, that could really take quite a long time. And it would impede. It was supposed to be a background process, but it's not a background process, is it? It's a process that's going on. It's going on while you're not doing anything. So if you pressed play, for example, that would then interrupt the waveform creation process, but there would be a bit of a lag. They sorted that out a long time ago, but it's still a good idea to have your cache in a fast location. So it's called a cache, I guess.
Well,
It's a cache.
Yeah. So one of the things we had a question here. Can you discuss how proxies have changed? I think he means the proxy update in 10.4.9.
Yeah.
They gave us many options with 10.4.9 that weren't available prior, that people have been asking for years. H.264 proxies, multiple resolution choice of proxies. Because when I was shooting in 4K, my proxies are 2K, right? Quarter size. I don't want a 2K proxy. I want a 720p proxy.
Yeah.
You know.
And they were ProRes proxy, yeah.
Yeah, and they were ProRes. That's correct. They can only be ProRes at the time. Sometimes it's like, what took you so long to change something like that? That's
if you had a bunch of H.264 files and you created proxies from them, you might end up with larger file size than your actual original media.
Right.
Not a good idea. But I mean, this new update is incredible. Probably best illustrated by it's actually on the next page. It's on page 23. I don't know why the page numbering's changed on between mine and yours.
Let me pull up 23 on mine. Proxy files, yeah, we got it.
Yeah, it's the next page. If you go to the next page, that's possibly,
this one?
Biggest.
Oh, there you go.
Exactly that. Yeah.
There you go.
If you just go up a little bit, yeah. I mean, that's essentially, down. Yeah. Original file size, which if you multiply this by, say, 1,000,
sure,
you're looking
absolutely
at 5.5 terabytes being condensed down into, if we're looking at the H.264 proxy on the bottom right there, which would be 6.4 gigabytes if it was multiplied
megabytes.
Yeah, but if we change this
gotcha
from terabytes to gigabytes, then you're looking at a little thumb drive with all of your media on it. That's just incredible. But possibly the most incredible thing is that the picture is, going back to the days of AVR 6 on Avid, where you could hardly see the difference between a person and a tree. this is just amazing. It's amazing. I mean, I think you're right. I don't know really quite what took so long, but it's, again, when Apple do it, the implementation is really very, very nice.
So one of the things people often talk about are sharing work in Final Cut Pro. They call it collaboration, different things. Everybody's looking for a solution like Avid has.
Yeah.
Now, my understanding of Avid, you can tell me if this is correct, is two editors cannot edit the same timeline at the same time. Only one.
No. Yeah. I think that's kind of the holy grail, isn't it? But I just don't think the technology is there, or anybody wants the technology to be there. Although I believe it might be possible in Resolve. But I just don't think that many people are going to really need to be doing it for many times. It's more often that people want to be sharing work easily and quickly and streamlined. So I don't think that's what people mean. I mean, obviously, it would be great to have someone color grading a final program that's going out in an hour, and someone's color grading it, and someone's sound mixing it at the same time, and then they're both done, and there's no need to copy and paste or amalgamate the two. But that's not what Avid does. But Avid does have, I mean, it's got so many different implementations of shared workflow now. 4 or 5 different ways. There's got, there's remote login, there's remote, there's download, there's live project sharing, there's bin sharing, things like Teradici and PCO over IP, all of these different things. They're all different solutions, but I think, and cloud obviously as well. We're actually working from the cloud. So there's so many different ways. I think the good thing, for me, one of the good things is that in London anyway, the post-production community seems to have almost, I think someone was saying 80% adopted remote working from home with no real problems.
Right.
Which is not great for the facilities owners, but well.
Well, things have changed. One of the things when I've talked to Avid editors like Michael Yanovich and actually his wife, who also is an Avid editor, with all the sophistication of the way they share, between different people to collaborate, you still have to, there's no way in Avid to talk to an editor and say, hey, can you unlock this bin for me? You have to do it with a message or a phone call or walk over there and ask them. There's no inner messaging in Avid itself.
In Avid itself, no. But I think there's a lot of DM technology and Slack and stuff like that.
But wouldn't it be nice if Avid had a little pop-up message? You can, both of you are running Avid and a little pop-up message. Hey, can you unlock this bin?
Yeah, I'm not sure if there isn't actually. I think I've got a sneaking suspicion there might be, but I might be imagining it. But that would be nice.
It seems like it's like SneakerNet. Go poke somebody in the next room to unlock this bin for me, or call them up on the phone, or instant message or something.
If you need it unlocked, I think the whole idea is that to prevent two people having access to the same bin.
No, absolutely. But if somebody's not working on it, or somebody has to work on it for whatever reason, but it just seemed like that was one of the things that I thought shouldn't be that hard to be built into Avid, a little messaging system to go back and forth. So one of the other things I want to talk about, two things: we're going to get to third-party people, plugins, PostLab and Hedge and Lumberjack, and with the other ones you mentioned. But before we go there, let's talk about, because I'm getting ready to buy new storage at NAS, network attached storage, direct attached storage. I know what that is. And then what are the other ones that you had? You had 3 or 4 of them, right? Network.
I'm just trying to find out exactly where you're looking so I can.
Let me pull this up. Here we go. For me, it's on page 43.
Yeah, I mean, there's SAN, there's direct attach, there's SAN, there's NAS, and then
Right.
And
then RAIDs, which are another one.
Well, a RAID is that DAS, NAS, and SAN are
they're all RAIDs.
They're methods of connectivity, aren't they? So, whereas a RAID is the method of striping disks together to create redundancy and speed.
Right.
And you can have a RAID, NAS, DAS, or SAN.
Are these?
I think.
Are any of these optimal for use with Final Cut? The NAS, or I know what the direct attached storage is. That could be a regular hard drive. That could be an SSD. That could be a RAID. But are NAS, or a SAN, or either one of them optimal for using with Final Cut?
Yeah, all of them. Yeah.
For speed?
As long as they're being used right, yeah. As long as you wouldn't want your library on a NAS or a SAN.
The library file.
I wouldn't want, even though 10 gig NAS are very fast now, and there are a lot, the connectivity and the pathways are optimized much more. You've always got the choice to have your library local. If you're sharing something with someone, if you're going backwards and forwards 6 times an hour between one library, between several people, then you may want to have that on shared storage. So it's a toss-up. I think that's why there's not one single answer. Say for example, you've got an archive, a music archive, which you want a team of 4 people to access. And you've maybe even got an assistant that's sort of indexing it and adding more music as you're going along. Obviously, you're going to, music doesn't take up much bandwidth to play or download. So that would be a perfect example of having an archive library on shared storage. But, if you've got 4K files, and you need to be downloading them, or there's so many different scenarios.
Right.
The ideal is for me, the ideal is always that your library is local. I don't think you're ever going to get a more optimal solution than that, but that doesn't necessarily mean, in terms of just speed of using Final Cut Pro. Right. But if you've got to keep handing that back to the server in order to, say, for example, your music guy or girl there's no need for them to download the library to their computer in order to do a little bit of indexing and keywording or favoriting or whatever, and then upload that back to the server. That way they're just going to end up with loads of different iterations of their library, and it's going to get confused. Someone's going to delete the wrong one. But if you've got a really complex timelines, projects, keywords, and all sorts of effects going on, it's probably and color grading, you're much more likely to be better off working locally.
So it seems like the same rules apply. Store your library and your cache on a direct attached SSD or an internal SSD, and then you can store media, or like you said, a music library on a NAS.
Yeah.
The same rules as before we were talking about.
Yeah. I mean, it's once you unpack what all of these different acronyms are and how they work, at the end of the day, it's speed, sometimes size. Size comes into it, because obviously you can't get, like, say for example, my 5 terabyte library, not library, but my 5 terabyte storage is not inside a library, it's external. I can't possibly have that on my local computer. I don't want that there anyway. I want it on a RAID because it's protected there, because I've actually got 2 copies of it. I've got it on 2 separate RAIDs, so it's doubly protected, but it's too important. It's too
Absolutely.
critical. It's 6 years of documentary. So I can't afford not to have that. But when I come to start working on that documentary, I'm not just going to copy 5.5 terabytes to my non-existent 5 terabyte
Right,
internal
of course.
SSD, because
Of
so I don't
course.
have an option in that case.
Do you?
But I
Do
do have
you?
an option to use a library on my local drive, which is what I do.
And just relink if you have to.
Well, I haven't ever had to relink because I've never changed the actual
Oh,
name of
I
the folder
see.
that it's been stored in. Yeah.
I see. You've always had it that way
Yeah.
from the beginning. Now, do you
Yeah.
use a MAM to keep track of that 6 years of work?
I'd like to say yes. But
I use NeoFinder. I love NeoFinder. If you're familiar with
I
that.
like Keyflow Pro. I like Keyflow Pro. I do have to say that I find I like being inside the NLE, to be honest. If I'm going to organize stuff, I like it in there. I understand. I don't think a MAM is I don't think there's much point in using it for one person like me.
Okay.
Because it's just 2 bits of software that I've got to keep an eye on, as opposed to one.
Right, I understand.
Because one of the things that Final Cut Pro is fantastic at is it's essentially a MAM with it's a MAM light, isn't it? It's got some very, very good metadata management.
Yes.
So of all the different NLEs, I think Final Cut is the one that least requires external media management.
With one exception, one thing I'd like to see improved. I'd like to see it manage non-open libraries as well, to remember them. Because you only work with the open libraries that you have, right?
Yeah.
So I'd like to see Final Cut keep a database of all the libraries you opened. It can tell you what drive it's on. It can tell you all the information, remember all that information.
That would be great. Yeah, that would be very, very useful. I agree with that. Yeah.
So let's go on to third parties. We have.
Oh wow, we've skipped chapter 2.
Which chapter? No, I thought we did some stuff in chapter 2.
Oh yeah, no. I mean, chapter 2 is huge. There's just so many workflows there, but I'm quite glad that you've not. I mean, chapter 2 is really for a very rainy weekend for people to get into, and there's so many different options in there. I hope it's comprehensive enough, but not too, not too busy.
Well, why don't you pick something from chapter 2? I'll go back over it.
No, I'm fine. I'm like I just think it's, it's there for reading. I could do, I think, a 5-10 minute YouTube tutorial on virtually every section in here. There's that much detail. It requires thought and, application, I think, to really get the most out of it. I think one of the takeaways that I learned from actually writing this paper is actually the nomenclature, and actually realizing that there are so many different types of shared workflow that not unlike projects. People use the word to mean different things, but people say, how's your shared media? And you're talking about remote media. Is it remote? Is it in someone's facility? Is it on the cloud? Is it on a local network? If it's on a local network, is it local, or does that, local means it's actually direct attached? So
right.
There's, I think when designing and speaking to a team about how it's all going to work, that actually understanding the nomenclature and what's actually going on, and how to describe it, is absolutely vital. And it took me quite a long time to organize this into sections that kind of made sense, I think. There's just it's almost like a big brainstorm, I think. Big brain dump, but I've hopefully got rid of the rubbish that came out of my brain.
Well, I'm glad that you did it and I didn't do it. I'm very glad of that, because I know how much work these things are.
Yeah.
Okay, chapter 3. So the big one, Frame.io. That's where the blog is located.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I can't really be. Obviously, I'm I'm not actually biased. I've used it every day for virtually 3 or 4 years, if not longer. It's an incredible application. This is just touching the surface really in here. The proxy functionality is insanely good. If you tried that, it's not been massively touted, but essentially it's creating proxies automatically in Frame.io that you can use and relink automatically inside Final Cut Pro. There's an incredible functionality going on, and it's using their engine. They're creating the proxies. You're not, So you're talking about, using up all of these CPUs and, leaving
Right.
something overnight to burn your proxies. Frame.io does it for you.
And some of my favorite people are at Frame.io, Patrick Southern and Michael Cioni, 2 friends of mine.
Yeah. And a few other people as well have recently joined. I'm not sure how...
Is it secret? You're smiling
no,
like there's a secret.
I don't think it is. I don't think
Okay.
it is, but I'm sure you must know. But and I mean, their upload speeds and their consistency and their ease of use for non-technical clients, I think is absolutely best in class. I can't say much more about it really. It does require, again, some thought, because there's like I say on page right at the beginning, there's 4 separate areas. There's the just the standard browser, Safari or Chrome or whatever, where
Right.
most people just access the review and approval. Then there's actually a Mac app that
Right.
allows you to do slightly more, have watch folders and stuff like that. So be great obviously for someone ingesting footage and just adding it to a watch folder, and it's automatically uploading to Frame.io and sending out to everybody in the team. The transfer app is great for stuff like big files, large amounts of files where you need to actually keep the folder structure the same so that you don't have to worry about relinking and all of that. That's fantastic as well. And the Final Cut workflow extension, which works within Final Cut.
I'd like to see more of those from developers.
Yeah. From developers from Frame.io or more.
No, the
more stuff from
workflow
other
extension
people.
was a great feature that they brought to Final Cut.
Yeah.
And I'd like to see more developers develop things for Final Cut. I know Apple has to approve them. For example, where's Blackmagic Raw after all this time?
Wow.
People have been talking about that for Blackmagic users. I am not one, but I hear it all the time. All the time. When is Final Cut going to have B-Raw? There's something going on there, whether it's political or whatever between the two companies. But if it'd be nice to have, Blackmagic Raw plugin where you can bring Blackmagic Raw on and have controls, whatever the controls are in Resolve.
Yeah.
Same kind of things.
Yeah. I mean, I think, it would be nice to see some more in there. I think it's quite a lot of work to get them working properly, and with software updates and especially OS updates as well. I think
Yes.
a lot of resources. Must be a bit of a headache for whoever's overseeing those workflow extensions. Who wake up in the morning and are like, there's another update, I've got to go and test them on all the platforms again now. And
well, not only workflow extensions, actually sometimes Final Cut itself. Like the OS updates and breaks something in Final Cut. We had, I think that was last year. So then we had Post-Lab in Final Cut Pro.
Yeah. So this kind of fixes all the things that are not in Final Cut Pro, all the things that are lacking. All the bin locking and the little safety mechanisms, and plus some very, very clever storage.
Yes. They're the drive. What do they call that drive that just comes on your desktop?
Just called Drive.
It is called Drive. I love that idea.
Just called Drive.
Yeah, I love that idea.
Yeah, it's pretty It's pretty awesome. I mean, it's like actually iCloud Drive will do the same, but it's nowhere near, not all virtual drives are the same in terms of speed or functionality.
Right.
So iCloud
Exactly.
Drive is great for sharing libraries, as I think I mentioned in the paper, but it's not there for sharing proxies. And I don't think well, no, it's fine for sharing proxies. I don't think it's going to be that great for playing them back. But again, it's all down to your internet speed, isn't it?
No, it is, and I'm not sure how Frame.io makes it so much faster. Somehow they do. I guess it's their servers or something. Upload and download.
Yeah, there's there's different types. I think the PostLab drive and obviously a lot of all of these other enterprise level solutions have got far more optimized. I think it's a figure of 5 or 6 times faster, isn't it? Than
It seems like everybody talks about that. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah.
And then we have Work for X, X to Pro, Lumberjack guys, my friends Philip and Greg. So I've had X to Pro for a while. That's for transferring audio to Pro Tools from Final Cut, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody uses Pro Tools. I mean, all the films use it. Almost everybody uses it for when you're in a certain level of post-production filmmaking. Everybody uses Pro Tools, so you got to get the Final Cut Pro, if you're using Final Cut Pro, over there.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
I mean, yeah. I mean, I've used all of these apps for a number of years. I don't think I've really ever used EDLX. All of the others just need a little bit of care and attention, and they work. They work. I'm always reading about people struggling to get audio out of Final Cut into Pro Tools, but there's just some procedures that you have to follow, which are generally written down by the makers of the apps on their websites. Not far to find, not hard to find. Again, they're all struggling with constant updates of software, and they're all trying to work across different people using different combinations of OS, etc., etc. But none of these apps that I'm just looking at right now, I've ever really had any problem with.
Well, Philip and Greg, I know both of them, and they just, if you have a problem, they're so responsive. I guess everybody is, Hedges as well. If you have any problems, you can contact them directly, and they'll work with you to get things resolved. Yeah, so I'm not sure. Yeah. Change List X, I don't have that one. I have most of them, but I don't have that one.
It's just for turnovers. Yeah, it's for film workflow, really. Which is, I don't know if you remember Cinema Tools.
Yes, I do. Absolutely.
So yeah, so obviously back in the day, if someone came along and made a change quite late in the day, and someone had already been working on a neg cut, and a shot needed to come out for whatever reason, then you'd need to ripple those changes across sound, picture, and it's absolutely vital for you can't just like lob a bit out. So yeah, it's really for turnovers, but obviously crucial in that world.
Do you think that Final Cut is going to have some kind of collaboration? I mean, people have been asking for it in the future.
I've no idea. It would only be me thinking, and I really have no idea. I'd have to be 100% neutral about that. I've really got no idea. I mean, everything's going the way of the cloud. I think it's interesting that this pandemic's happened, now, as opposed to either 5 years ago or in 5 years' time. I think in 5 years' time, the cloud workflow will be in a totally different world. And 5 years ago, it would have been even more chaos than it already is. But So I don't know. I don't know if Apple are going that way.
Well, it doesn't seem like
Hard to know.
Final Cut was designed for that from the beginning. I guess that's my point. It doesn't seem like it was designed for collaboration. It seemed like there was more for.
Well, it's got the databases there. It seems to have the infrastructure. It's just that, you can't have, well, like PostLab has got a very clever way of managing libraries so that two people can't have one library open. But that essentially that's the issue.
Okay.
And having something on the top of that to actually manage
Right.
that process, because right now it's just human. It's just a human process trying to work out who's got which library open where. But that's essentially what PostLab does, and it does it very well. Very well.
Okay. One of the things I want to go over with you is the ultimate transfer library. It's on page 34.
Yeah.
Let's go over that, because that, I've heard about transfer libraries for years, and I've used them myself for different levels of success, let's say. So what's changed? With 10.4.9 came the ability to copy an entire library to an already existing library or to an entirely new library from within Final Cut Pro. So now you can do a transfer. Go ahead.
Yeah, so it's not too different. They've just really added one feature, which is the ability to copy a library from within Final Cut Pro. Whereas like you didn't used to be able to do that. You'd have to go to the Finder, and ideally you'd close your library first, because you don't want to be copying libraries that are open, because they're databases. So that's an absolute recipe for disaster, copying databases that are running. So what you do is you'd have to close down your library. I'm sure many people have, including me, have chanced it and just sort of made a clone of the library and then thrown it on the server so that someone can access your copy. But the safe way would be to close your library, go to the Finder, make a copy of it, maybe make a compressed copy of it, put it on the server, and then tell your colleague that there's a copy of it there. You can open it up. But now you can do that all from inside of Final Cut. So it's quite a big thing, because it doesn't really interrupt your process. If someone says, "Can you just send me that entire library?"
Right.
And keep working. Let's say I'm logging a live ingesting file, like a long incoming sports feed or something, or a news feed, and I'm logging it all the time. I'm keywording it, and then my colleague next door says, I need that information. Can you send that through to me? I just literally select copy library to. The whole thing goes. I don't have to think about selecting what event or keyword collections going. The whole thing goes across. That's really all I mean. But it was just a function that was missing from the previous functionality. Yeah.
10.4.9 was a big update. Like I said, it came through in August. And the other thing was 10.4.9 is a bigger update than 10.5, which is it's like upside down and backwards. I've never seen a update to Final Cut Pro before that the point update was bigger than the following point update, but 10.4.9 was absolutely bigger than 10.5.
Yeah. Maybe it was something to do with the pandemic and people needing more remote working tools. So all the proxy functionality, maybe that was going to be 10.5, but they decided to bring it forward because it was ready. Yeah. Something like that. Who knows? I've really got no idea more than
I thought the same thing when I saw 10.4.9. I said, this seems like it should have been in 10.5. I said the exact same thing when I first came out. So one of the things that people, when they talk about third-party things, we have EDLX, DaVinci Resolve. It seems to be a lot of times a go-between Final Cut and other NLEs. Besides the color correcting, sometimes it'll just, you can use DaVinci Resolve, the free version, which is very powerful, and go between. So I don't use it for color grading. I'm not a colorist, but I just started using it for editing, and I really like it. So DaVinci Resolve accepts Final Cut Pro XML directly. So, and then you can output other different things. I don't know if you can output audio, AAF. I mean, for Pro Tools from DaVinci. I don't know if you can or not.
I'm not sure either, actually, on that question.
Well, the interesting thing was when Logic Pro, I think it was 10.5 came out, and then Final Cut was still at 10.4.8. The version of XML going in and out of Logic was a couple measures back because Logic wasn't really interested in the video part of the file. I think it was like FCP XML 1.6 or something Logic was using, and Final Cut was doing 1.8 or 1.9, I forget which, but Logic wasn't really interested in the video part, so it's going back and forth between Final Cut Pro and Logic doesn't work that well. It's kind of strange that it doesn't, but it doesn't seem like it works that well.
Yeah, I have had a couple of goes, but not really in a time or critical job. I tend to do it in all in Final Cut as much as I possibly can, and if it needs something like Logic, hopefully I've got someone else to do it. Which is not always the case, but the tools are there in Final Cut Pro. They're all there. But yeah, people that like tracks. I mean, I think the audio world is even more conservative to change than the sort of standard Avid editing community.
No, I understand. I like
I've
tracks
got a friend
for audio.
I've got a friend who's a Foley editor at Pinewood, and I went to see him. I can't remember when it was, and they were. I'm only about 10 years ago. In fact, I think it was 10 years ago, and they were still using Betacam SP to play back. Seriously,
that's amazing
to sync to, to get their mix working to, basically because their software was working. They didn't see any need whatsoever to update, because they'd have to update across the whole studio or their whole facility. They're talking about, and they're in the middle of a film. They're doing stuff like James Bond, and they can't afford to do it. So they're just like, hang on a sec, it worked last time. Let's just go with this, because imagine they would lose a job. They would lose a client forever, probably, if they messed up on a job of that nature.
Sure, absolutely.
They don't get the chance to test it on anything, I guess.
I completely understand the financial aspect of that. Absolutely. Sometimes it's just too big. I have an old Mac Pro, I think it's a 2009 in my studio downstairs, because I have it still works. I have all my audio interfaces, all the drivers, all the hardware. I can take 24 tracks in and out, 24-bit. It records it perfectly. And I can still, I don't edit with it, but I still track with it. I can still track 24 tracks simultaneously, 24-bit, in and out, no problem, because the hardware's there, all the drivers are there. I've updated the OS as far as I could, and it works fine. It works fine. I don't edit on it, but I track with it, absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this goes back all the way to what I said at the beginning of the conversation about just the fundamentals, editing, story, picture, sound together. All of the other tools are way less important than the story. And obviously, if you're just spitting out, videos that need turning around in hours, not weeks, the software does become really, really important, but I recently fell back in love with editing, not because of the software or the tools, but because of actually putting together pictures and sound that created something out of nothing. So I'm a big fan of that. And in terms of the audio guys at Pinewood, I think they're very much, in that world. So it's almost like, how much more development do we need of software now? The tools are there.
Yep. No, that's true. But I don't want these NLE manufacturers to be resting on their laurels and say, oh, we've gone far enough. We're not going to do any more innovation. Of course, there's always room for it somewhere.
Well, I think, the commission-based, the subscription-based services,
Right.
They're going to have to keep improving, aren't they? Because they're going to have to justify, the price that they're charging people per month.
Right. For the rest of their lives. Never stops.
Well, yeah.
Premiere.
Yeah.
You can. It's amazing. A subscription is one thing. I have lots of subscriptions. But the idea that your software will stop working if you stop paying the monthly fee, the existing, is just ludicrous to me. The way Premiere does it. That's just ludicrous. Keep the version that I have now. I understand I can't get the new version, but don't make my existing software stop working if I stop paying you for the rest of my life.
Yeah. I think that will probably become an issue at some point.
Yeah.
Not sure how they would deal with it, but yeah. It's not cheap.
No, it's not cheap. I don't want to be paying that fee when I'm 90 years old and I just want to do my home movies. I don't want to do that.
No, exactly, yeah. But you would like every now and again to be able to, have a look at something you did back in the good old days.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. I posted a clip this week when they had all the Bernie people, the Bernie guys sitting everywhere, Bernie.
Oh, yeah.
And I used to do sound at the archives, and I had Obama was there at one point, and I did sound for the White House, and I put Bernie in it, and the picture of Obama on one side and the archivist on the other side. So I went back to that project, exactly what you're talking about from years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't want to pay to keep doing that. That's my main objective. Alex, I think we've covered everything. Not quite, but your paper is very, very extensive, and I highly recommend everybody go read it. I've posted it multiple times in YouTube, the link, and I have it on our screen right now.
Yeah, good luck. Thanks for hosting, and it's a pleasure to talk about it in detail.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm really sincerely hope it helps people, because that's the best possible result is that it's getting used.
Well, it is. I mean, just today, put your library on an SSD, put your cache on an SSD. Your media can live on a RAID. Your media can live on a NAS. Those are great tips right there. That's one of the most basic ways of working with Final Cut. But you have to have your media external. Can't have it managed. Otherwise, that doesn't work. Unless it's small. Unless it's, like you said, cat videos.
Yeah. Cat videos are different. They're special, yeah.
That's a special category.
And dog videos, yeah.
Yes. Both.
I do more dog videos, but yeah.
I do. I work with, one of the places that I work with locally is animal rescues. I work with horse rescues, cat rescues, dog rescues locally. Okay. I do promotional videos for them all the time.
Respect.
Wildlife. Yeah. Because I love animals.
Yeah. I'd like to get involved in something like that. Put my skills to good use. I will.
Doing white paper is good. I hope we get to see one before another 7 years.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows what may come next? Yeah, maybe I'll do one about importing and ingesting, but that's another nest of vipers. But yeah.
Or if Final Cut Pro 10.6 changes dramatically, you might have to do another one.
Yeah. You mean the track-based version of Final Cut?
No, I don't think track-based, but I think personally, I think they're working on something big. I don't think it's just going to be a small incremental update.
Yeah.
So
let's hope so. Here's to then. I'll be back then.
There you go. Alex, thank you so much. I sure appreciate you coming on. Alex Snelling, everybody.
Pleasure. Thank you. Cheers. Bye-bye.
Talk to you later.